Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
Life has a strange way of surprising you. For years, my world revolved around my late wife, Susan, and our quiet life together. When she passed away 3 years ago after her painful battle with breast cancer, it felt as though the ground beneath me had disappeared. I buried myself in work as a biochemical engineer, dealing with toxic chemicals that most people wouldn't dare to go near. It paid well, sure, but it was lonely work, just like my life had become. My dog, Kevin, a goofy Labrador retriever, was the only one keeping me company, wagging his tail and reminding me there was still something to care for. Then came Malina. Meeting her felt like breathing fresh air after being trapped in a room full of fumes. She's 42, a little younger than me, but mature, warm, and grounded. A single mother to Ella, her 18-year-old daughter, Malina seemed like the kind of woman I could build something meaningful with. I hadn't thought about dating after Susan, but there was something about Malina that made me feel alive again. Ella, though, that's been a challenge. She's stunning, no doubt about that, but her beauty has spoiled her. She carries herself with an arrogance that's hard to ignore, acting as though the world owes her something. I've tried to connect with her, but every attempt has been met with eye rolls, snarky comments, or outright dismissal. I can tell she doesn't approve of me, and honestly, it stings. I'm just a man trying to make a place for myself in her life because I care about her mother. It doesn't help that Malina's mother, Vivian, seems to share Ella's disdain. From the moment we met, she made it clear she didn't think much of me or my work. She outright told Malina that I wasn't good enough for her. Vivian thinks I don't have a real job, whatever that means, even though my salary could pay for her retirement and then some. I guess she prefers someone in a flashy suit with a title she could brag about. But I'm not here to impress her. I'm here because I love her daughter. For now, I take things one day at a time. Loving Malina means accepting the baggage that comes with her life, even if it's complicated. I've weathered storms before, and I'm not going to let Vivian's judgments or Ella's attitude scare me away. This feels worth fighting for. When Malina and Ella moved in, I knew it wasn't going to be smooth sailing. What I didn't anticipate was just how much friction Kevin, my dog, would create. Kevin is a part of my life, plain and simple. He's loyal, easygoing, and the only living thing in this house that doesn't talk back. Unfortunately, Ella and Vivian don't share my opinion. Ella seems to go out of her way to antagonize the poor dog. She complains constantly about his smell, the hair he sheds, and the way he thumps his tail against the furniture. I've caught her deliberately leaving doors open, probably hoping Kevin would wander off and solve the problem for her. Of course, Kevin is smarter than she gives him credit for. He sticks close to me, even when she's trying to shoo him away with a broom. Vivian, though, has taken it a step further. She made it clear the dog is a deal-breaker. If the dog stays, there's no wedding, she announced one night, sipping her tea like she was handing down a royal decree. I just nodded, not giving her the satisfaction of a reaction. I don't take ultimatums lightly, especially not from someone who spends most of her time criticizing everything about me. Malina, to her credit, tries to keep the peace. She doesn't share their dislike for Kevin, but she's cautious about siding with me too openly. I get it. She's balancing a lot. But there's a limit to how much I'm willing to compromise. My home is Kevin's home, and that's not up for negotiation. Ella's attitude hasn't improved since they moved in. If anything, living under the same roof has made her more vocal about her disdain for both me and the dog. I overheard her on the phone with a friend the other day, complaining about how gross it is to live in a house with a dog. I chose to let it slide, but it's becoming clear that we're going to have a conversation sooner or later. Vivian, thankfully, doesn't live with us, but her presence looms large. She visits often and always manages to slip in a comment about how inappropriate it is for someone like me to have a pet when I'm trying to blend families. She even suggested I consider rehoming Kevin for Ella's sake, as if the dog is some disposable piece of furniture. I've been polite so far, but my patience is wearing thin. This is my house. I invited Malina and Ella in because I saw a future with them, but that doesn't mean I'm going to start dismantling my life to cater to their whims. Kevin has been with me through thick and thin, and I'm not about to send him packing because a teenager doesn't like the way he smells. If Vivian thinks she can dictate terms for my life, she's got another thing coming. And as for Ella, she's 15. She's entitled to her opinions, but this isn't a democracy. At some point, she's going to have to learn that the world doesn't revolve around her preferences. For now, I'm holding my ground. Kevin stays, no matter how much barking there is, on both sides. Every family has its quirks, but Malina's family is in a league of its own. Vivian, her mother, seems to have a unique talent for making bad decisions and then doubling down on them. Take her favorite son-in-law, Tony, for example. A former, or perhaps current, drug dealer who spends more time in and out of jail than he does with his wife, Nancy. Yet somehow, he's the golden boy. Vivian sings Tony's praises every chance she gets. He knows how to provide, she says, usually with an air of smugness, as though a knack for dodging law enforcement is an admirable skill. Apparently, the fact that he brings in the dough is enough for Vivian to overlook the small detail that most of his earnings aren't exactly coming from legitimate means. Tony and I couldn't be more different. While I've spent my life working in a respectable, stable job, dealing with dangerous chemicals in controlled environments, Tony's been living on the edge, dabbling in activities that could land him behind bars for good. Yet somehow, in Vivian's eyes, I'm the one who doesn't measure up. It's comical, really. I've built a career that pays well, provides a comfortable home, and leaves me with enough time and energy to care for the people I love, and my dog, Kevin. But none of that seems to matter to Vivian. Tony, with his shady dealings and criminal record, is her ideal son-in-law because he's a man who takes risks and gets results. The irony isn't lost on me. Vivian looks down on my work, calling it just a job, while holding up Tony as an example of success, even though his lifestyle could land Nancy in trouble by association. It's not that I wish ill on Tony, I don't, but it's hard to take Vivian seriously when her standards for success are so blatantly skewed. Nancy, for her part, seems content with the arrangement. Whether that's out of love for Tony or convenience, I can't say. She's friendly enough, but I steer clear of getting too involved. Their dynamic is their business, and I've got enough on my plate without trying to untangle their mess. Still, I can't help but wonder how Vivian rationalizes her blatant favoritism. It's clear she measures worth by the wrong metrics: money, appearances, and a willingness to bend the rules. If that's the standard she's judging me by, then I'll never win her approval, and honestly, I'm fine with that. Living with Ella has been a test of patience, but the real challenge isn't just her, it's Vivian. That woman has done more to reinforce Ella's snobbish attitude than any teenager needs. Vivian pampers Ella's worst behavior, treating her arrogance like a badge of honor. It's exhausting. The breaking point came when I found out Ella had bullied a girl at school. A few parents got involved, and the details made my blood boil. Ella had humiliated the girl in front of their classmates over something trivial: her clothes, of all things. It wasn't just mean, it was cruel. When the school contacted us, I thought this would be a moment of reckoning for Ella, a chance for her to face some consequences. Instead, Vivian swooped in like a defense lawyer at a high-profile trial. Ella is just expressing herself, she said, brushing it off as though bullying is some natural rite of passage. That other girl needs to toughen up. That was it for me. I sat Malina down and made it clear. This behavior was unacceptable, and it wouldn't be tolerated in my house. Ella wasn't going to grow up thinking she could mistreat people without consequences, not under my roof. At first, Malina was defensive, as I expected she'd be. She's a mother, after all, and it's natural to want to protect your child, even when they're in the wrong. But I was firm. Ella has to apologize, I told her. And Vivian needs to stay out of this. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a boundary. The argument that followed wasn't pleasant, but it needed to happen. I reminded Malina that while I cared deeply for her and was committed to making this family work, I wouldn't stand by and let this kind of behavior continue. This is about setting a standard, I said. If Ella thinks this is okay now, what's next? Where does it stop? Eventually, Malina saw my point. She agreed to talk to Ella, though I could tell she wasn't thrilled about it. As for Vivian, I made sure she understood that her interference wasn't welcome. I told her flat out that backing Ella's bad behavior was doing more harm than good, and that if she couldn't see that, she needed to stay out of it. She didn't take it well, of course. Vivian rarely does when someone challenges her. But for once, she backed down, though not without some dramatic eye-rolling and muttering about how I was too strict. Ella, to her credit, did apologize. It wasn't the most heartfelt apology I've ever heard, but it was a start. More importantly, she saw that there were lines she couldn't cross in this house without consequences. That moment set a precedent. This is my home, and I won't let it become a breeding ground for entitlement or cruelty, no matter how much Vivian tries to coddle Ella. If I'm going to be a part of this family, there have to be rules, and those rules apply to everyone, including Ella and Vivian. I wasn't expecting to come home early that day. I thought I'd just relax, maybe catch up on some work emails, and enjoy a quiet evening with Kevin. Instead, I stumbled into a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. A conversation that flipped my world upside down. I was in the kitchen when I heard voices. Malina and Vivian were talking in the living room. At first, I didn't pay much attention. Vivian's visits had become less frequent over the past year, but whenever she came around, the two of them liked to chat and sip tea like old times. I figured this was more of the same. Then, a sentence caught my ear, sharp and clear. "Come on, Mom. I have waited for a year. He provides good. Let me marry him first, then I will get rid of him." I froze. Did I hear that right? I leaned against the counter, gripping it for balance as her words sank in. "Then at least I can get this house and his money," she continued, her tone casual, like she was planning a weekend getaway and not discussing how to dismantle my life. "Then I might also move you in here." Vivian's reply was muffled, but I didn't need to hear her words. It was clear she wasn't objecting. Then came the cherry on top. "No, I am not having sex with Tony now. That was last week." My stomach churned. Tony. Of course, it had to be Tony, the golden boy. Suddenly, all those late nights and girl trips Malina took made sense. I stood there, stunned, as the realization washed over me. The past year had been a carefully constructed lie. I stayed silent, listening for a few more minutes, but I couldn't bear to hear any more. My mind raced, piecing together every suspicious moment, every odd interaction. It all fit. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a scheme, and I was the mark. I didn't confront them then. I didn't storm into the living room and demand answers. No, I walked out the back door, needing space to think. The betrayal cut deep, but I wasn't going to let emotion cloud my judgment. I had worked too hard for everything I had. For this house, my career, my peace of mind. I wasn't going to let Malina and her toxic family take it from me. One thing was clear. This was over. I didn't care how much time I had invested, how much I thought I cared for her. She and her manipulative games had no place in my life. I sat in the backyard with Kevin for a while, running through my options, legal protections, cutting ties, and making sure I came out of this mess unscathed. I had the resources, and now I had the motivation. That night, I acted like nothing had happened. I needed time to plan my next move, to make sure I wasn't blindsided by any counterattack. But as far as I'm concerned, Malina, Ella, and Vivian have overstayed their welcome. This is my home, my life, and my future, and I'll be damned if I let them take it from me. Sometimes, revenge isn't about anger. It's about precision. After overhearing Malina's betrayal, I decided I wouldn't yell or fight. I'd solve the problem permanently. They wanted me gone? Fine. I'd just send them somewhere far enough that they wouldn't be my problem anymore. I started with Vivian. "Vivian," I said over the phone, my voice as warm as I could muster. "I've been thinking a lot about how things have been between us. I want to make things right." She hesitated. "What do you mean, Richard?" "Well," I continued, "you've never really liked me, and I get that. But I want us to bond, and I thought a family trip might be the perfect way to start fresh. I've planned something special, an African safari." "A safari?" Her tone softened immediately, excitement creeping in. "Where?" "Somalia," I said with confidence. "It's off the beaten path, exclusive, untouched by mass tourism. It's the real Africa, Vivian. You'll love it." There was a pause, then a laugh. "You know what, Richard? That sounds nice. I'll talk to Malina." Convincing Ella was even easier. She barely listened, too busy scrolling on her phone. "Ella, we're going to Africa. You'll have a chance to post some amazing pictures for your social media." She shrugged. "Whatever. As long as I get to shop." Finally, I broached the idea with Malina. "I know you've been under a lot of stress, and I thought a trip would be a great way to unwind," I said, holding her hand like the perfect boyfriend. She gave me a cautious smile. "You're really trying, Richard. That's sweet. Oh, and I think Tony and Nancy should come, too. It's a family thing, after all." Her eyes lit up at the mention of Tony. She tried to hide it, but I caught it. "Really? You're okay with that?" "Of course," I said smoothly. "This trip is about making things right." The day of the flight arrived, and everything went according to plan. We flew into Somaliland, and I kept the enthusiasm high. "This place is incredible," I told them as we disembarked. "We'll take a cab to the hotel, and from there, we'll arrange our safari tours." The confusion started when I mentioned the need for 2 cabs. "Why can't we all go together?" Vivian asked, her suspicion flaring. "Simple logistics," I replied with a smile. 6 people and luggage. It's too much for 1 car. I'll follow behind and meet you at the hotel." They bought it, of course. I flagged down a cab for them and handed the driver a piece of paper with the hotel name I'd made up, written alongside Mogadishu City Center. As they piled into the cab, Ella groaned. This place is so dusty. Are there even malls here? You'll love it, I assured her. It's authentic. Malina gave me a skeptical look. You're sure this place is safe, right? Safe? It's paradise. I lied effortlessly. Now, you all go ahead, and I'll be right behind you. As the cab pulled away, I watched them go, a mixture of satisfaction and relief washing over me. I turned to the cab driver who would take me to my actual destination. Change of plans, I told him. Take me back to the airport. Flying back home after my little safari detour felt like shedding a heavy, toxic coat. The house was finally quiet. No more snobbish comments from Ella, no more manipulative schemes from Malina, and certainly no judgmental stares from Vivian. Just me and Kevin, living the way we always should have. First, I took care of the legalities. I contacted my lawyer and filed a restraining order against all three of them, Malina, Ella, and Vivian. I wanted to make sure that none of them could come near me or my home again. Then, I packed up all their things, threw them into a few old boxes, and drove straight to Vivian's house. As I dumped the boxes on her porch, I smiled to myself. Vivian, still stuck in Somalia, wouldn't be able to help her precious daughter and granddaughter anytime soon. A week passed, and just as I was settling back into my peaceful life, chaos came knocking, literally. It was a Saturday morning. I was sipping coffee and watching Kevin chase a squirrel in the yard when the doorbell rang. The moment I opened the door, I saw Malina charging at me like a bull. Her face was red with rage. "You think you can just get rid of me like that?" she screamed, pounding on the door. "Malina," I said, keeping my voice calm. "You need to leave. I don't want to call the cops, but I will." "Call them," she spat, slamming her fists against the door. "You can't treat me like this. I gave you a year of my life." "A year of lies," I shot back, my patience wearing thin. "You made your intentions clear, Malina. You're not welcome here anymore." By now, Ella had joined in, yelling something incoherent and banging on the windows. Kevin, my loyal companion, barked ferociously from inside, clearly ready to defend his home. "Get your crazy selves off my property," I warned. When they didn't stop, I stepped back and dialed 911. "Hello? I need officers at my address immediately. I have 2 people trespassing and trying to break into my house." The cops arrived within minutes. 2 squad cars pulled up, lights flashing, and officers quickly assessed the situation. "She won't let us in," Malina wailed dramatically as an officer approached her. "Ma'am, step back from the property," the officer commanded. "I just want to talk to him," she insisted, but her aggressive stance made it clear she wasn't here for a polite conversation. "I have a restraining order against both of them," I informed the officers, handing over the paperwork. That was the nail in the coffin. The officers didn't hesitate to cuff both of them. "You're making a mistake, Richard," Malina yelled as she was escorted to the squad car. "You'll regret this." "No, Malina," I replied coolly. "The only thing I regret is not seeing through you sooner." Ella was less dramatic, but just as furious, glaring at me as they loaded her into the car. Once they were gone, the peace in my home felt even sweeter. Kevin wagged his tail happily as I scratched behind his ears. "Well, buddy," I said, "I think we've finally gotten rid of them for good." Kevin barked in agreement, clearly enjoying the quiet as much as I was. As for Vivian, last I heard, she was still in Somalia, scrambling to find a way home. I wasn't losing sleep over it. Justice had been served, and for the first time in a long time, my house and my life was truly my own. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.